My dear young friends, I am pleased to speak to this BYU Idaho audience. I'm conscious that I'm also speaking to many in other places. In this time of the internet, what we say in one place is instantly put before a wider audience, including many to whom we do not intend to speak. That complicates my task, so I ask your understanding as I speak to a very diverse audience. In choosing my subject, I have relied on an old military maxim that when there is a battle underway, persons who desire to join the fray should march to the sound of the guns. So it is that I invite you to march with me as I speak about religious freedom under the United States Constitution. There is a battle over the meaning of that freedom. The contest is of eternal importance, and it is your generation that must understand the issues and make the efforts to prevail. An 1833 revelation to the prophet Joseph Smith declared that the Lord established the United States Constitution by wise men whom he raised up for that very purpose. The Lord also declared that this Constitution should be maintained for the rights and protection of all flesh. In 1833, when almost all people in the world were still ruled by kings or tyrants, few could see how the infant United States Constitution could be divinely designed for the rights and protection of all flesh. Today, 176 years after that revelation, almost every nation in the world has adopted a written constitution, and the United States Constitution profoundly influenced all of them. Truly, this nation's most important export is its Constitution, whose great principles stand as a model for the rights and protection of all flesh. On the vital human right of religious freedom, however, many constitutions fall short of the protections that are needed. So we are grateful that the United States government seeks to encourage religious freedom all over the world. To illustrate the importance of basic human rights in other countries, I refer to some recent history in Mongolia, which shows that the religious freedom we have taken for granted in the United States must be won by dangerous sacrifice in some other nations. Following the perestroika movement in the Soviet Union, popular demonstrations in Mongolia forced the communist government to resign in March 1990. Other political parties were legalized, but the first Mongolian elections gave the communists a majority in the new parliament, and the old repressive attitudes persisted in all government departments. The full functioning of a democratic process and the full enjoyment of the people's needed freedoms do not occur without a struggle. In Mongolia, the freedoms of speech, press, and religion, a principal feature of the inspired United States Constitution, remained unfulfilled. In that precarious environment, a 42-year-old married woman, Oyun Altunjarel, a department head in the state library, courageously took some actions that would prove historic. Acting against official pressure, she organized a Democratic Association Branch Council. This 12-member group, the first of its kind, spoke out for democracy and proposed that state employees have the freedoms of worship, belief, and expression, including the right to belong to a political party of their choice. When Oyun and others were fired from their state employment, Oyun began a hunger strike in the state library. Within 3 hours, she was joined by 20 others, mostly women, and their hunger strike, which continued for 5 days, became a public demonstration that took their grievances to the people of Mongolia. This demonstration, backed by major democratic movement leaders, encouraged other government employees to organize similar democratic councils. These dangerous actions expanded into a national anti-government movement that voiced powerful support for the basic human freedoms of speech, press, and religion. Eventually, the government accepted the demands, and the adoption of a democratic constitution 2 years later took Mongolia on a major step toward a free society. For Latter-day Saints, this birth of constitutional freedom in Mongolia has special interest. Less than 2 years after the historic hunger strike, we sent our first missionaries to Mongolia. In 1992, these couples began their meetings in the state library where Oyun was working. The following year, she showed her courage again by being baptized into this newly arrived Christian church. Her only son, her only child, a 22-year-old son, was baptized 2 years later. Today, the Mongolian members of our church number 9,000, reportedly the largest group of Christians in the country. A few months ago, we organized our first stake in Mongolia. Called as the stake president was Sister Oyun's son, Ojawel. He had studied for a year at BYU Hawaii, and his wife, Ariuna, a former missionary in Utah, graduated there. One of the great fundamentals of our inspired Constitution, relied on by Oyun of Mongolia and countless others struggling for freedom in many countries in the world, is the principle that the people are the source of government power. This principle of popular sovereignty was first written and applied on the American continent over 200 years ago. A group of colonies won independence from a king, and their representatives had the unique opportunity of establishing a new government. They did this by creating the first written constitution that has survived to govern a modern nation. The United States Constitution declared the source of government power, delegated that power to a government, and regulated its exercise. Along with many other religious people, we affirm that God is the ultimate source of power, and that under Him it is the people's inherent right to decide their form of government. Sovereign power is not inherent in a state or nation just because its leaders have the power that comes from force of arms. And sovereign power does not come from the divine right of a king, who grants his subjects such power as he pleases or is forced to concede, as in Magna Carta. As the preamble to our Constitution states, we, the people of the United States, do ordain and establish this Constitution. The principle of sovereignty in the people explains the meaning of God's revelation that He established the Constitution of the United States, that every man may act according to the moral agency which I have given unto him, that every man may be accountable for his own sins in the day of judgment. In other words, the most desirable condition for the effective exercise of God-given moral agency is a condition of maximum freedom and responsibility, the opposite of slavery or political oppression. With freedom, we can be accountable for our own actions and cannot blame our conditions on our bondage to another. This is the condition the Lord praised in the Book of Mormon, where the people, not a king, established the laws and were governed by them. This popular sovereignty necessarily implies popular responsibility. Instead of blaming their troubles on a king or a tyrant, all citizens are responsible to share the burdens of governing, that every man might bear his part.